The night was cold, colder than any night he had seen that winter. Snow kept falling outside, covering the old wooden cabin in white. Inside, the human man sat near the fire trying to keep himself warm. He thought the night would be silent, but then he heard it. A faint knock. At first he thought it was only the wind, but then the knock came again, slow, weak, like someone was too tired to stand. His heart jumped. Who could be out there in such weather? No traveler would survive long in the storm. He stood, grabbed the lantern, and opened the door. There she was. A figure collapsed on the frozen steps, her skin pale blue, her body shaking, her lips whispering words he barely understood. "I'm freezing. Human. Let me in," she begged, her voice so soft he almost thought he imagined it. Her eyes glowed faintly. Alien, not of this world, yet filled with desperation. The human froze in place. He had heard stories of aliens wandering the land, some harmless, some dangerous, many hunted by others. If he let her in, he might be in danger. If he left her out, she would surely die before dawn. He looked at her trembling hands, her frost-covered hair, and made his choice. "Come inside," he said, his voice firm but quiet. He lifted her carefully, her body light as if made of fragile glass, and brought her to the fire. She clung to him, her icy fingers gripping his coat until he set her down. The warmth of the fire touched her face. She shivered hard, gasping for air. Her eyes, strange and glowing, turned to him with something between fear and gratitude. "You saved me," she whispered, each word broken. "I will reward you. Promise." The human frowned. He did not care for rewards. He only knew he could not watch someone die outside his door. Still, the way she said it, the way her eyes fixed on him, it made him uneasy. What kind of promise was she speaking of? He handed her a blanket, rough and old, but enough to shield her from the cold. She wrapped it around herself, her small frame almost lost inside it. For a moment, she just stared at the fire, as if she had not seen warmth in years. "Eat," the man said, placing a bowl of soup near her. She looked at it, then at him, unsure if she could trust him. Finally, she lifted the spoon with shaking hands and tasted it. Tears filled her glowing eyes, perhaps from the heat, perhaps from relief. Silence filled the cabin for a long while. The storm outside raged louder. Inside, the fire crackled, and the alien woman's breath slowed. She looked up at him again, her lips parting as if to speak more, but no words came. Her body gave in to exhaustion, and she leaned against the chair, half asleep. The man sat back, watching her carefully. He knew nothing about her, who she was, where she came from, or why she had ended up at his door. But one thing was certain. This night was no ordinary night. The knock on his door had changed everything, and as the storm howled outside, he wondered if by saving her, he had just invited greater danger into his home. The promise she made lingered in his mind, a whisper he could not forget. The storm outside did not stop through the night. Snow piled high against the cabin walls, and the wind screamed like a wild beast. Inside, the fire burned low, casting shadows across the wooden room. The alien woman stirred, waking slowly, her body still weak but her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The human was still awake, sitting near the door, rifle resting across his knees. He had not closed his eyes even once, his mind too alert. He watched her carefully, unsure if she was truly helpless or hiding something. When she noticed his eyes on her, she whispered, "You do not sleep. Why?" He answered quietly, "Because I do not know who you are." Her lips trembled, not only from cold, but from fear. After a long pause, she pulled the blanket tighter around herself and said, "Then I will tell you." She leaned closer to the fire, her breath misting in the air. "My name is Sira," she whispered, her voice fragile. "I was not meant to be here, but I ran. I had no choice." The human frowned. "Ran from who?" Sira's eyes glistened as she spoke. "From my own people." He did not believe her at first. How could someone run from their own kind? But her voice shook as if each word carried heavy pain. "They said I was useless, too weak, too thin to breed. No male wanted me, so they put me in the market." She paused, her voice breaking. "The buyers came not to marry, but to eat." The human felt his blood run cold. He had heard rumors of alien cruelty, but this was different. "You were being sold for meat?" he asked quietly. Her head lowered, shame and horror in her glowing eyes. "Yes, I was only meat to them." For a long moment, silence filled the cabin again. The crackle of the fire was the only sound. The human's hands tightened on the rifle, anger stirring deep inside him. Syrah looked at him with sudden intensity, and then she said the words that made him pause. "You saved me, so I promise I will reward you," she whispered firmly. "My people never break promises. Once given, it is sacred." Her voice was soft but carried a strange strength, a vow unbreakable. The human shook his head. "I don't need reward. I just didn't want to see someone die at my door." But she leaned forward, eyes glowing brighter. "No, human, you do not understand. My promise will follow you until it is fulfilled." Her words unsettled him. He did not know what kind of reward she meant. Gold, knowledge, power, or something far stranger, but her expression showed she was serious. Her kind treated promises like chains of honor. He said nothing, only fed the fire more wood, while she continued staring at him as if memorizing his face. As the night deepened, the storm outside roared even louder. Syrah suddenly turned her head toward the window, her eyes narrowing. "There are others," she whispered sharply. "I can feel them, they are close." The human stiffened. "Others like you." She shook her head, fear flashing in her gaze. "Hunters. They followed my trail. They will not stop until I am dead." His chest grew heavy. He had feared this. By letting her in, he had brought danger to his cabin. But now she was here, trembling, terrified, yet bound by a promise she swore to him. He could not simply cast her back into the snow. "You brought me inside," she whispered, clutching the blanket like a shield. "That means I belong to your fire now. My promise is yours, even if hunters come." Her words cut into the silence, leaving him no room to argue. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm now rising between them. The human realized something that night. Her promise was not a gift, it was a chain, and whether he wanted it or not, his life had just been tied to hers. The storm had not calmed, it only grew louder. The cabin shook as if the wind wanted to tear it apart. Inside, the fire glowed dim, its light flickering against wooden walls. The human sat with his rifle across his knees, his eyes half closed but alert. Across from him, Syrah, the alien woman, sat wrapped in the blanket he had given her. Her skin was still pale, but no longer blue from the cold. Her eyes, glowing faintly, were fixed on him, studying him in silence. He tried to ignore her gaze, but it was impossible. At last she spoke, her voice low. "You do not fear me." The human raised his brow. "Should I?" Syrah's lips curved into the smallest broken smile. "Most humans run when they see eyes like mine." He shrugged. "You were freezing. Didn't look much like a monster to me." Her hand trembled as she reached toward the bowl he had given her earlier. She sipped what little soup remained, closing her eyes as if it was the best thing she had ever tasted. When she set it down, she whispered, "You saved me, fed me, gave me warmth. Why?" The human did not answer quickly. He stared into the fire as if searching for words. Finally, he said, "Because leaving someone to die on my doorstep is not something I can do." Syrah looked at him for a long moment, her glowing eyes softening. Then she whispered again, "That is why humans are different. We do not understand you, but we fear you." The cabin grew quiet, except for the fire and the storm. The human leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment, but he did not notice when Syrah slowly stood, her steps weak, and moved closer to the fire. She lowered herself onto the floor, only a few feet away from him. He opened his eyes again, startled. "What are you doing?" Syrah looked down at the flames. "I will stay near the fire, but also near you. I feel safer this way." He frowned but said nothing, only shifted to make room. For a while, they sat in silence, the sound of the storm outside like a drum. Her breathing grew steadier, no longer shaky and shallow. Her fingers stretched out from the blanket, warming against the fire. At last, she turned her face toward him and asked, "Do you believe in promises, human?" He looked at her puzzled. "Depends who makes them." Her lips curved again, not quite a smile, not quite sadness. "My people's promises bind our lives, once spoken. They can never be broken, not even by death." Her eyes glowed brighter as she whispered, "That is why my promise to you is stronger than you think." The human shifted uncomfortably. "I still don't know what you mean by reward." She tilted her head, her hair falling across her face. "You will see," she whispered. "But know this, I will not betray you, not even if they come for me." Her voice carried both fear and strength, a strange mix that made the human's chest heavy. He stared at her. wondering if she truly meant it. The storm howled, rattling the window shutters. Somewhere outside, a branch cracked under heavy snow. Sierra startled, her hands clutching the blanket tighter. The human raised his rifle and stood, his eyes searching the door. After a tense moment, silence returned. He lowered the weapon and looked back at her. Sierra met his gaze, her lips trembling. Then she whispered, "You protected me already, even from shadows." He exhaled slowly and set the rifle down again. As the fire burned lower, exhaustion pulled at them both. The human stretched out on the chair, keeping one eye open. Sierra curled up near the hearth, her glowing eyes closing at last. For the first time, she seemed peaceful, as if the storm could not touch her here. He watched her for a long while, the flickering light painting her face. She looked fragile, but not weak, broken, but still alive. He realized then that trust had already begun to form. Then, if he had not asked for it, the first night of trust had been written in the snowstorm, and there was no going back. The storm had slowed by midnight, but the silence that followed was heavier than before. The human sat in his chair, his rifle resting against the wall, while the fire gave only a faint glow. Sierra lay curled up near the hearth, her breathing slow and soft, as if she had finally found peace. But outside, the world was not at peace. The wind had died down. Yet he heard something else, snow crunching under heavy steps. At first he thought it was only falling ice, but then it came again, steady, careful, closer. His hand moved to the rifle instantly, his eyes narrowing toward the door. He whispered under his breath, "Someone's out there." Sierra stirred, her eyes opening, faintly glowing in the dim firelight. She looked at him, then at the window, her breath catching. Her body stiffened like prey sensing a predator. "Not someone," she whispered. "Hunters." Her voice shook with fear, but also with certainty. The human frowned. "You're sure?" She nodded quickly, pulling the blanket tighter. "They followed me through the storm. They never stop. They never give mercy." Her words cut into the silence like a knife. He stood and moved toward the window, peeking through the cracks of wood. The snow reflected pale moonlight, and shadows moved between the trees. 4 figures, tall and cloaked, their shapes wrong for humans. Their movements were silent but too precise, hunters trained to kill. His chest grew heavy. The danger she spoke of was real. Sierra crawled closer to him, her glowing eyes wide. "If they see the fire, they will know I am here." The human kicked snow over the flames, smothering the light until the cabin fell into darkness. The sudden cold rushed in, but at least the fire's glow no longer betrayed them. Only faint moonlight slipped through the gaps in the wall. They crouched together, his rifle ready, her trembling hand clutching the blanket. "Why do? Now they want you dead," he whispered. Her lips pressed tight before she answered. "Because I ran from the market, because I refused to be meat." Her voice broke. "They hunt me to finish what was started." The human's grip on the rifle tightened, anger stirring in his chest. To hunt someone like an animal, to treat life as worthless, it disgusted him. Sierra's breath came fast, her glowing eyes fixed on him. "They will kill you too, if they find you protecting me." He looked at her, calm but firm. "Then let them try." Outside, the snow crunched again, closer this time. The hunters moved slowly around the cabin, testing the walls, searching for an opening. The sound of claws scratched against the wood, making Sierra flinch. She pressed her forehead into her knees, whispering in her alien tongue, a prayer or a curse. The human placed a steady hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "Stay quiet," he said, his voice steady. "They don't know for sure we're here." But deep down, he knew it was only a matter of time. Predators could smell fear, and they would not leave without finding her. For a long moment, both of them sat in silence, listening to the hunters circling. The cabin walls felt thinner than paper, the air heavy with dread. Sierra finally whispered, her voice trembling, "If they break through, leave me. Run. Maybe you can live." The human turned his eyes to her, firm as stone. "No, you knocked on my door. That makes you mine to protect." Her glowing eyes widened, surprise flickering in them. No one had ever spoken like that to her, not even her own people. She opened her mouth to speak, but her voice failed, her throat tight with emotion. Outside, the hunters stopped moving, the silence heavier than before. Then came the sound, a low growl, sharp and cruel, echoing through the snowy woods. The human raised his rifle, his jaw set, Sierra's hands trembled, her heart racing. But in that moment she realized something. The human was not just shelter, he was the shield between her and the world, and for the first time in her life, she felt a flicker of trust. Even as shadows outside waited for blood, the hunters circled the cabin for a long time. But at last the sounds faded into the storm. The human waited, holding his rifle steady, his ears sharp for any more footsteps. Only when silence returned did he allow himself to breathe. Sira sat trembling, her glowing eyes wide with fear. When it seemed the danger had passed for the moment, he lit the fire again. The flames rose, filling the cabin with warmth and light. Sira crawled closer, her thin hands stretched out toward the fire as if she needed its touch to stay alive. Her eyes reflected the flames, glowing brighter in the dim cabin. She stayed silent for a long time, as if weighing the words in her chest. At last she whispered, "You should not have kept me here. They will return, stronger, many more." The human shrugged, his voice steady. "Maybe, but until then, you are safe." Her lips trembled. No one had ever said those words to her before. The fire cracked, sending sparks upward. The sound made Sira flinch. Then she wrapped the blanket tighter around herself. Her voice broke as she said, "You want to know why I ran? Why they want me dead?" The human leaned forward, his eyes fixed on her. "Tell me." For a moment, she stared into the flames as if they could answer for her. Then the story spilled out, each word heavy. "In my world, worth is measured by strength, by beauty, by ability to breed." Her throat tightened, but she pushed on. "I was none of those things, not strong, not beautiful, not fertile. To them I was useless." Her eyes glistened with tears, glowing brighter with the wetness. "They mocked me, my own people, until one day they decided I had no value at all." She drew in a shaky breath. "They sent me to the market, not for a mate, not for a family, but for meat." The human's chest grew tight, rage flashing in his eyes. Sira lowered her face into her hands, her shoulders trembling. "I was caged like an animal, waiting for someone to buy me, waiting for death," she whispered. "And I would have been gone if not for the storm. I escaped when the chaos came, but the hunters followed." Her voice cracked. "They will not stop until I am caught." The firelight painted shadows across her face, making her look both fragile and fierce. The human spoke at last, his voice quiet but sharp. "No one is useless. No one deserves to be treated like that." Sira lifted her head slowly, her eyes searching his face. You really believe that?" He nodded, his gaze firm. "Yes." The words struck her harder than any blow because no one had ever believed in her before. For the first time she felt seen, not as food, not as a mistake, but as someone who still mattered. Tears slipped down her cheeks and she whispered, "That is why my promise to you is not light, human. I will repay you, even if it costs me my life." The human leaned back, watching her with a mixture of pity and respect. He had not asked for her promise, but he could see it was all she had left. It was the only piece of dignity she still carried from her broken life. The fire burned warmer, yet the silence between them grew heavier. Outside, the storm roared again, but inside the cabin was a world of its own. Two strangers bound by accident, by survival, and by words spoken near a fire. The human realized then that this night was not just about keeping her alive, it was about hearing her truth, about seeing her as she had never been seen before. And though the hunters were still out there waiting, a new bond had been forged by firelight, one that neither storm nor shadow could easily break. Morning came slowly, hidden behind heavy clouds. The storm had left the land silent and white, snow covering everything in sight. The human stood at the cabin door, staring at the endless blanket of ice. Behind him, Sira sat close to the fire, her blanket wrapped tightly around her small frame. He had not slept, his mind turning again and again. She had told him her story about the market, the cage, the hunters. Now he understood why they had circled the cabin, why danger waited just beyond the trees, and he knew soon he would have to choose. Sira's voice broke the silence, soft but heavy. "You should send me away," she whispered. "I bring death to your home." The human turned, his brow furrowed. "If I do that, you will freeze in the snow or die in their claws." Her glowing eyes lowered. "Better me than you." He stepped closer, his voice sharp. "No, that's not how I live, not how humans live." Her lips trembled. "But they will come again, and they will not stop until I am gone." She clutched the blanket tighter, as if it could shield her from the truth. He looked at her, his jaw set, and then he said the words that sealed his path. "You knocked on my door. That makes you mine to protect." The weight of the words hung between them. Sira stared at him, shock and disbelief in her glowing eyes. "No one has ever spoken like that for me," she whispered, tears threatening to fall. The human turned back to the door, watching the snow-covered trees. He knew the hunters were still out there, patient, waiting. He also knew that keeping her meant war, sooner or later, but his heart had already chosen. He went to the old chest near the wall and pulled out supplies, an axe, a few more bullets, a rope, and dried food. Sira watched with wide eyes. "What are you doing?" He answered firmly, "Preparing. If they come, I won't let them take you." Her voice shook. "Why risk your life? For me? You don't even know me." He paused, looking at her with calm but steady eyes. "Because life is not about what I get from someone, it's about what is right." The words struck her deeper than any blade. She lowered her gaze, shame and hope mixing in her chest. For so long she had been treated as worthless, but here was a man who chose to risk everything for her. Her heart pounded, fear still there, but for the first time, warmth too. She whispered, "Then my promise to you grows stronger, human. I will not forget this." The cabin grew quiet again, but not empty. The fire burned brighter, the air heavy with unspoken thoughts. Sira moved closer to him, her glowing eyes fixed on his face. "You are not like others. Maybe you are the first who ever saw me as alive," she said softly. He looked at her, and for a moment their eyes held, but then the sound came, far off in the trees, sharp and cold. A horn, alien and cruel, echoing across the frozen land. Sira gasped, her hands tightening on the blanket. They are calling to each other. They are near. The human's grip tightened on his rifle, his choice already made. There would be no running, no hiding, not anymore. He had chosen to protect her, even if it meant blood on the snow, even if it meant his cabin turned into a battlefield. Sira's promise bound her to him, but his choice had bound him to her, and as the horn sounded again, closer this time, they both knew the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm now coming for them. The horn echoed again through the frozen woods, deep and sharp. The human gripped his rifle tightly, his eyes narrowing toward the door. Sira crouched near the fire, her glowing eyes wide with fear, her hands clutching the blanket like a shield. The silence that followed was worse than the sound itself. Then it came, footsteps crunching in the snow, heavy and fast. Shadows moved between the trees, closing in on the cabin from all sides. The human's heart pounded, but his hands were steady as he lifted the rifle. Sira whispered, "There are many. Too many." "Stay low," the human said firmly. The first crash came against the wall, wood shaking under the impact. Sira gasped, her body trembling. The human fired through the window, the blast shaking the cabin, the shadow outside falling into the snow. But three more figures appeared, their shapes tall and twisted, eyes glowing red in the dark. They snarled in voices not human, their claws scraping the wood as they pushed harder against the cabin walls. The human reloaded quickly, his breath steady. "Come on then," he muttered under his breath. The door burst open with a violent crack. One of the hunters leapt inside, its mouth filled with sharp teeth, its body covered in icy armor. The human fired again, the blast striking its chest, sending it crashing back into the snow. But another was already climbing through the window. Sira screamed, clutching the blanket. Then something inside her snapped. Her glowing eyes flared brighter, her hands trembling in the air. A sudden spark of strange energy burst from her palms, striking the hunter in the window. The creature shrieked, smoke rising as it fell back into the snow. The human turned to her in shock. "You can fight!" Sira's body shook, her breath ragged. "I did not know. I never tried before." But there was no time for questions. Another crash came from the back wall. Mo. Rehunters were forcing their way in. The human grabbed Sira's arm and pulled her toward the corner. "Stay behind me," he ordered, but she shook her head, her glowing eyes fierce despite the fear. "No, I will not hide. Not anymore." The next hunter charged through, claws flashing. The human swung the rifle and fired point blank, the creature dropping with a heavy thud. Sira raised her hands again, another spark flying from her fingertips. This time the light burned brighter, forcing two hunters to stumble back into the snow. Her strength faltered, her body collapsing to her knees. The human caught her before she hit the floor, his voice urgent. "Easy, you'll kill yourself." Her lips trembled. "I promised to protect you too." She struggled to rise, but her body was too weak. The hunters outside let out another growl, their voices carrying through the storm. The human knew they would not stop, not until one of them was dead. He set Sira gently against the wall and reloaded his rifle with the last of his bullets, his jaw tight, his choice already clear. "If they want you, they'll have to go through me," he said coldly. Sira looked up at him, her glowing eyes filled with both fear and something deeper. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Why do you fight for me?" He answered without hesitation, "Because you knocked on my door." The hunters came again, crashing into the cabin. The human fired, Wood splintering, snow spraying, blood spilling. Sierra forced herself up one last time, her body glowing faintly as energy flickered between her hands. Together, human and alien stood against the storm. Outside, the snow turned red under the fight. Inside, the fire burned low but fierce. The cabin shook, the night roared, but still they stood. And in that moment, their bond was no longer words or promises, it was survival. The cabin was filled with smoke and the smell of blood. The hunters had been driven back, their bodies lying in the snow, but the fight had left scars. The wooden walls were cracked, the door half broken, and the fire nearly gone. The human stood breathing hard, his rifle heavy in his hands. Beside him, Sierra leaned against the wall, her body weak, her glowing eyes dimmer than before. Her hands still shook from the strange power she had used. She whispered through shallow breaths, "I did not know. It would take so much." The human crouched near her, his face firm but worried. "You saved me, but you nearly burned yourself out." She tried to smile, but it came out broken. "My promise to you grows heavier with every breath," she said softly. The human shook his head. "No, promises or not, you don't owe me your life." But Sierra's glowing eyes locked on his, filled with a strange fire. "I do, human, because you chose to protect me when no one else would." Suddenly, a loud crack split the night. The back wall of the cabin gave way, snow pouring in with a violent rush. The hunters had not given up. They were clever, waiting for the moment of weakness. The human grabbed Sierra's arm, pulling her away as the roof began to shake. "Out now," he shouted. Together they stumbled into the snow, the freezing wind cutting at their faces. Behind them, the cabin collapsed with a roar, flames and wood falling into ruin. Sierra gasped, clutching his coat. "You're home." He did not look back, his jaw tight. A home can be built again, but not a life. The words hit her deeper than the cold. No one in her world would ever say such a thing. No one valued her life that way. Tears blurred her glowing eyes, freezing on her cheeks. They staggered through the snow, the hunter's growls echoing behind them. The human pushed forward, searching for cover. At last he found it, a frozen river, its bank, hollowed by ice. He dragged Sierra beneath the ridge, hiding them both in the shadow of the snow. The hunters moved past above them, their heavy steps thundering across the ice. Sierra pressed close to him, her body trembling, her breath short. Her voice was a whisper. "If they find us, you must leave me. Run while you can." The human shook his head sharply. "No, don't say that again." Her glowing eyes searched his, weak but filled with sorrow. "Why, human? Why do you choose me over your own safety?" He looked at her, his voice steady and low. "Because survival means nothing if I lose the part of me that makes me human." Her lips parted, her heart pounding at his words. The hunters' shadows passed above, their growls fading slowly into the distance. At last the woods grew silent, only the sound of their breaths remained. Sierra leaned her head against his chest, her eyes closing. "You saved me again, but you have lost everything," she whispered. The human looked back toward the burning ruin of his cabin. Smoke rose against the night sky, glowing red in the snow. It was true, his home, his fire, his shelter, all gone. The price of survival had been paid in full. Yet as he looked down at the alien woman resting against him, he realized he had gained something he did not expect. A bond stronger than walls, stronger than wood or stone, something worth protecting even in the endless cold. Sierra's weak voice broke the silence. "I said I would reward you. Now my promise must be fulfilled." Her eyes glowed faintly as she whispered, "Even if it costs me everything." The human's heart tightened at her words. He did not yet know what her promise truly meant, but he knew this. Together they had survived the night and the hunters would return, but so would their will to fight, for survival had a price, and they had both paid it. Now their bond was sealed in fire, blood, and snow. The night stretched on, heavy with silence after the hunters passed. The human sat beneath the frozen riverbank, his rifle resting across his knees. Sierra leaned against him, her body weak, her glowing eyes faint, but still alive. Smoke from the fallen cabin drifted in the distance, painting the sky with red. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the cold wind and the creaking of the ice above. At last, Sierra's trembling voice broke the silence. "My people see me as nothing, but you gave me warmth, shelter, and life." The human looked at her, his expression calm but tired. "You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone should have done." Her lips pressed into a thin line, her glowing eyes locking onto his. No, human, you still don't understand what I mean. She pushed herself upright, her hands shaking but her voice steady. In my world, promises are sacred, unbreakable, stronger than blood, stronger than death. She took a deep breath, the glow in her eyes brighter. I gave you my promise, and now I must give you my reward. The human frowned, confused. Reward? What kind of reward? Sira reached out slowly, her cold fingers brushing against his hand. Her touch was weak but deliberate. My people do not give gold or jewels or weapons, she whispered. We give ourselves, our loyalty, our lives. And if the bond is deep, even our hearts. The human stiffened, surprised by her words. You mean, your promise is to stay with me? She nodded slowly. Yes, my life is yours now. You are my fire, my protector, my bond. Her voice shook, but not from fear, from truth. He stared at her, his chest heavy. He had not expected this, had not wanted chains or vows, only to save a life. But as she leaned closer, her glowing eyes soft, he realized this was not chains for her, it was freedom, her way to give meaning to the life she almost lost. Sira whispered, gain, her lips trembling. They may hunt me forever, but as long as I live, I belong to you. Tears gathered in her glowing eyes, falling like stars against her pale skin. The human felt his chest tighten, his voice low. I never asked for this, Sira. Her hand clutched his, fragile but firm. And yet, you have it. The silence grew heavy, broken only by the crack of ice in the distance. For the first time, the human did not see a weak alien trembling by his fire. He saw someone willing to stand by him, even in the face of death. Someone who gave not because she was forced, but because she chose to. The human exhaled slowly, his words steady. Then hear me, Sira. If your life belongs to me, then mine belongs to you too. Her glowing eyes widened, shock and warmth filling them at once. No one has ever spoken that to me, she whispered, her voice breaking. He gave her a faint smile. Then it's the first of many things you'll hear. For a moment, the world outside disappeared. The hunters, the storm, the ruins of the cabin, all faded. What remained was the bond sealed between them, not of blood, not of power, but of choice. Sira leaned her head against him, her tears still falling. This is my true reward, human. Not gold, not jewels, but me. Her whisper trembled with emotion, and I give myself freely. The human closed his eyes, holding her close against the endless cold. Above them, the sky darkened, and the storm prepared to rise again. But inside the hollow of ice, two lives had joined in one promise. And for the first time, survival was no longer just survival. It was the beginning of something far greater. The night faded into a pale gray morning. The frozen land stretched endlessly, silent except for the wind. Smoke still rose from the ruins of the human's cabin, black against the snow. He stood on the riverbank with Sira at his side, both battered but alive. Her glowing eyes looked at the ruins, sadness heavy in them. You lost your home because of me, she whispered, her voice trembling. The human shook his head slowly. A home can be built again, but what we found here, that cannot. His words warmed her more than the fire ever had. For a long moment, they stood in silence, their breath misting in the cold air. The world felt empty, but also new, like a path waiting to be walked. Sira turned to him, her hand brushing his. What will you do now? He looked at the horizon, his voice steady. I will not hide, and neither will you. Her lips parted in shock. You mean, face them? He nodded firmly. If hunters return, if your people come, we face them together. Sira's heart pounded. Never had anyone spoken those words to her. In her world, she had been alone, unwanted, but here, he had chosen her. They began walking across the snow, leaving the ruins behind, each step heavy but filled with purpose. The human carried his rifle across his back, his eyes sharp on the woods. Sira walked beside him, her glowing eyes watching the sky. As they moved, she whispered, I was told humans were weak, soft, foolish, but you... She paused, searching for words. You are not weak. You are the strongest I have ever known. The human gave her a faint smile. Strength is not in claws or teeth. It's in choosing what's worth fighting for. Her chest tightened at his words, her eyes misting with tears again. By nightfall, they found shelter in a broken cave near the cliffs. The fire burned small inside, shadows dancing on the walls. Sira sat close to him, her head leaning against his shawl. Older. This bond between us, It feels like destiny, she whispered. The human did not answer right away, his gaze on the flames, but then he turned to her, his voice quiet but firm. Maybe it is. Maybe this was always meant to happen. Her glowing eyes widened, her breath catching. Meant. That a human and an outcast alien would find each other. He nodded slowly. Yes, because only together could we survive this storm. Her tears slipped down again, but this time they were not only of sadness, they were of hope, something she thought she would never feel again. Hope that tomorrow would not be as cold, not with him beside her. Outside, the night sky cleared, the storm gone at last. Stars filled the heavens, bright and endless. Sira looked up through the crack of the cave, her glowing eyes reflecting the light. She whispered softly, "My people call the stars the eternal fire, the place of all promises." The human followed her gaze, his voice calm. "Then let the stars witness ours." He took her hand, rough and warm against her cold fingers. Her heart leapt, her tears falling freely. She whispered, "Together, against the stars." The fire burned low, but it no longer mattered, for warmth was no longer only from flame but from bond. They had lost everything: home, safety, peace. Yet they had gained more. A promise unbroken, a choice shared. When dawn came again, the hunters might return. When night came again, more storms might rise, but they would face it side by side, no longer strangers, no longer alone. The human whispered, almost to himself, "Then we keep each other warm." Sira closed her eyes, leaning against him with a faint smile, and as the stars shone above the frozen world, two lives, once broken, had become one path, one fire, one promise, together against the stars.